The law of emotional intelligence. The law of emotional intelligence is a universal principle that teaches us how to understand and manage our emotions in order to lead a more fulfilling life. One of the fundamental principles of emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive and become aware of our emotions. This means becoming conscious of the emotions we are experiencing and identifying the triggers that cause them. Just like the law of physics governs the physical world, the law of emotional intelligence governs our emotional world. It states that in order to understand and effectively manage our emotions, we must first become aware of them. This means paying attention to our emotional experiences, identifying triggers that cause them, and understanding the context in which they occur. Becoming aware of our emotions is essential for emotional intelligence because it allows us to evaluate and interpret them in a more objective way. When we are not aware of our emotions, we may react to them without understanding the reasons behind our actions. This can lead to negative outcomes, such as acting impulsively or making poor decisions. Today, we will explore the importance of becoming aware of our emotions and the various tools and techniques that can help us do so. From mindfulness practices to emotional self-awareness exercises, we will delve into the ways in which we can tap into the power of the law of emotional intelligence to lead a more fulfilling life. Let's get started. What is the law of emotional intelligence? The law of emotional intelligence is an invaluable technique that can help people find balance and harmony in their lives. This law consists of being able to recognize, comprehend, regulate, and adjust our emotional state in any given situation. By understanding the impact of our emotions, we're able to better grasp how they can affect our thoughts, perspectives, relationships, and decisions. With increased mastery over emotions comes the potential to unlock greater levels of mental flexibility, productivity, and personal growth, not only in work-related arenas, but also in all aspects of life. The ability to perceive, evaluate, interpret, and demonstrate control over our emotions so that they don't run wild opens up a world of possibilities that, when implemented, can provide us with incredible insights as well as joyous occasions. By engaging with this law on a daily basis, we can foster greater levels of self-awareness, which will enable us to manifest meaningful connections with ourselves and the world around us. The law of emotional intelligence, also known as EQ, plays a huge role in our lives on a daily basis. This law suggests that emotions are an asset we can use to think through our decisions and gain mastery of how we feel. Having a strong IQ doesn't just help with expressing how you feel and maintaining relationships. EQ can allow us to look within to understand the subtleties of ourselves and remain equipped for any situation. Improving your emotional intelligence is the key to evaluating and understanding our internal landscape with greater clarity, and so that we can go on to discover the needs of others or take meaningful actions in situations. With diligent effort, we can strengthen our EQ, allowing us to experience life more fully as we learn how to leverage our intuitive wisdom and bring forth greater balance, joy, and productivity in our lives. The law of emotional intelligence is a powerful tool that can help us live better lives. The ability to understand and be in touch with our own emotions as well as those of others enables us to make choices that are beneficial to our well-being. With the capacity to perceive, evaluate, interpret, possess control over our feelings, we can manage them intelligently and use them to advance our purpose, including preserving and enhancing relationships, achieving more meaningful goals, and living a happier life. Harnessing the power of emotional intelligence gives us the skill sets to create a better quality of life for ourselves. Understanding and managing your emotions. Emotions are a powerful force that can greatly influence our thoughts and actions. They are a natural part of being human, and understanding and managing them can greatly improve our lives. This is where the law of emotional intelligence comes in. The law of emotional intelligence is based on the idea that emotions can be perceived, evaluated, interpreted, and controlled. By understanding and managing our emotions, we can make better decisions, build stronger relationships, and lead more fulfilling lives. The first step to understanding the law of emotional intelligence is to recognize that emotions are not good or bad. They simply are. It is our perception, evaluation, interpretation, and demonstration of control over our emotions that can lead to positive or negative outcomes. To perceive our emotions, we must be aware of them. This means becoming conscious of the emotions we are experiencing and identifying the triggers that cause them. For example, if we're feeling anxious before a presentation, we should take note of that feeling and consider the factors that may be causing it. Once we are aware of our emotions, we can begin to evaluate them. This means analyzing the emotions we are experiencing, determining whether they are appropriate or not. For example, if you're feeling anxious before a presentation, it may be appropriate to feel some nervousness, but excessive anxiety can be an indication that something else is going on. After evaluating our emotions, we can interpret them. This means understanding the meaning behind the emotions we are experiencing. Let's use the same example. If we're feeling anxious before a presentation, we may feel that we are worried about not doing well or being judged. We can demonstrate control over our emotions by managing them. This means taking steps to regulate our emotions in a positive way. Let's use the same example again. If we are feeling anxious before a presentation, we can practice deep breathing or visualization techniques to help calm ourselves down. The law of emotional intelligence is a powerful tool that can help us lead more fulfilling lives by understanding and managing our emotions. By recognizing that emotions are a natural part of being human, we can work to make them work for us instead of against us. Good or bad? One of the key principles of the law of emotional intelligence is recognizing that emotions are not inherently good or bad. They simply are. It's our perceptions, evaluation, interpretations, and demonstrations of control over our emotions that can lead to positive or negative outcomes. Here's another example. Anger is often viewed as a negative emotion, but it can also serve a purpose. It can be a sign that something is not right and can motivate us to take action and make changes. In contrast, feelings of joy can also be perceived as negative if it's not appropriate for a current situation. For example, feeling joyous after hearing someone's death news. It is important to understand that our emotions are not something to be ashamed of or to suppress. Instead, we should learn to accept and understand them. By doing so, we could gain insights into ourselves and the world around us. When we understand that emotions are not good or bad, we can begin to evaluate and interpret them in a more objective way. This allows us to make better decisions and take more appropriate actions. It also helps us to avoid the traps of labeling certain emotions as negative and avoiding them, which can lead to repressed emotions that can manifest in unhealthy ways. The law of emotional intelligence teaches us to recognize that emotions are a natural part of being human, and that they can be perceived, evaluated, interpreted, and managed in a positive way. By understanding and managing our emotions, we can lead more fulfilling lives and make better decisions. Being aware of our emotions. To truly understand and manage our emotions, we must first become aware of them. This means becoming conscious of our emotions we are experiencing and identifying the triggers that cause them. Being aware of our emotions is essential for emotional intelligence because it allows us to evaluate and interpret them in a more objective way. When we are not aware of our emotions, we may react to them without understanding the reasons behind our actions. This can lead to negative outcomes, such as acting impulsively or making poor decisions. To become aware of our emotions, we can practice mindfulness techniques such as meditation, deep breathing, or journaling. These practices can help us to slow down and pay attention to what we are feeling in the present moment. We can also use emotional self-awareness exercises like emotional check-ins, which is a technique that involves regularly taking time to identify and reflect on our emotions. This practice can help us to understand the emotions we are experiencing and the triggers that cause them. It's also important to note that emotions are not just personal, they can be collective. They can be perceived as a group phenomenon, especially in cases of emotions related to social identity. It's important to be aware of how emotions can be spread in a group and how our emotions can impact the group's emotions and vice versa. Being aware of our emotions is an essential aspect of emotional intelligence. By becoming conscious of our emotions and identifying the triggers that cause them, we can better understand and manage them. This can lead to more positive outcomes, such as making better decisions and leading a more fulfilling life. Evaluate them. Once we are aware of our emotions, the next step is to evaluate them. This means analyzing the emotions we are experiencing and determining whether they are appropriate or not. Evaluating our emotions is an important step in emotional intelligence because it allows us to understand the context of our emotions and how they may be impacting our thoughts and actions. It also allows us to determine if our emotions are in proportion to the situation or if they are excessive or not appropriate for the situation. Let's use a presentation example for a second. If we're feeling anxious before a presentation, it may be appropriate to feel some nervousness. But excessive anxiety could be an indication that something else is going on. And in this case, evaluating our emotions would help us to understand that our anxiety is excessive and that we may need to take steps to manage it. One way to evaluate our emotions is to use a technique called emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning. This involves thinking about our emotions in a logical and objective way. By asking ourselves questions such as, is this emotion appropriate for the situation? Or, is this emotion proportionate to the situation? We can gain a clear understanding of our emotions and how they are impacting us. It's also important to note that our emotions are not always accurate, and that's why evaluating them can help us to question our emotions and make sure that they are not leading us astray. Evaluating our emotions is an important step in emotional intelligence. By analyzing our emotions and determining whether they are appropriate or not, we can gain deeper understanding of our emotions and how they are impacting our thoughts and actions. Interpreting them. After evaluating our emotions, the next step is to interpret them. This means understanding the meaning behind the emotions we are experiencing. Interpreting our emotions is an important step in emotional intelligence because it allows us to gain insights into the underlying cause of our emotions. It also helps us to understand the connections between our emotions and our thoughts and actions. Let's use the presentation example again. If we're feeling anxious before a presentation, interpreting our emotions will help us to understand that the anxiety may be caused by the fear of not doing well or being judged. This insight can then be used to take appropriate actions, such as seeking support, practicing deep breathing, or preparing more thoroughly. One way to interpret our emotions is to use a technique called emotional journaling. This involves writing down our emotions and the events that triggered them. By reflecting on our emotions in this way, we can gain a deeper understanding of the underlying causes and meanings of our emotions. Another way to interpret our emotions is to use emotion-focused copying strategies. This includes techniques such as emotional expressions, emotional regulations, and problem-focused copying. Emotion-focused copying strategies helps to focus and understand the meaning behind our emotions, which can be beneficial in dealing with them. It's also important to note that interpreting emotions is not always easy, and sometimes we may need help of a therapist or counselor to help us understand the meaning behind our emotions. Interpreting our emotions is an important step in emotional intelligence. By understanding the meaning behind our emotions, we can gain insights into the underlying cause of our emotions and how they are impacting our thoughts and actions. Managing them. Another step in the law of emotional intelligence is demonstrating control over our emotions by managing them. This means taking steps to regulate our emotions in a positive way. Managing and regulating our emotions is an important aspect of emotional intelligence because it allows us to take control of our emotional experience and make them work for us instead of against us. When we are able to regulate our emotions, we are better able to make decisions, build stronger relationships, and live a more fulfilling life. There are many ways to manage and regulate our emotions. Some common methods include deep breathing and mindfulness practices, engaging in physical activities or exercise, practicing relaxation techniques such as yoga or Tai Chi, connecting with loved ones and social support, getting enough sleep and maintaining a healthy diet, cognitive behavioral therapy, emotion-focused therapy, using humor and perspective taking. Also important to note that managing and regulating our emotions is not always easy, and sometimes we may need help of a therapist or counselor to help us develop coping strategies. It's also important to remember that managing and regulating our emotions is an ongoing process, and it requires consistent effort and practice to develop and maintain the skills. It's also important to be aware of our emotional state and take action to regulate emotions as soon as they arise, so it will be easier to manage them. Managing and regulating our emotions is an important aspect of emotional intelligence. By taking steps to regulate our emotions in a positive way, we can demonstrate control over our emotions and lead more fulfilling lives. It requires consistent effort and practice to develop and maintain the skill, and seeking help from professionals if needed. Mindfulness practices. Mindfulness practices such as meditation and deep breathing are powerful tools for regulating our emotions in a positive way. By bringing our attention to the present moment and focusing on our breath, we can calm our minds and reduce the intensity of negative emotions. Mindfulness practices can also help us to become more aware of our emotions, which is an important step in the law of emotional intelligence. Other steps to regulate our emotions in a positive way include engaging in physical activity or exercise, practicing relaxation techniques such as yoga or Tai Chi, connecting with loved ones and social support, getting enough sleep and maintaining a healthy diet, emotion-focused therapy, using humor and perspective taking. It's important to find the practices that work best for us and make them a consistent part of our daily routine. It's important to be mindful of our emotions and take action to regulate them as soon as they arise. This way, it will be easier to manage them. It's also important to keep in mind that managing and regulating our emotions is an ongoing process, and we may need to try different techniques and approaches before finding the one that works best for us. With consistent effort and practice, we can learn to regulate our emotions in a positive way and live a more fulfilling life. Emotional self-awareness exercises. Emotional self-awareness exercises are a powerful tool to help regulate our emotions in a positive way. These exercises involve regularly taking time to identify and reflect on our emotions. This practice can help us to become more aware of our emotions and understand the triggers that cause them. By understanding our emotions, we can take appropriate action to regulate them in a positive way. Some examples of emotional self-awareness exercises include emotional check-ins. This exercise involves regularly taking time to identify and reflect on our emotions. It can be done in writing, verbally, or even through art. It's important to find the way that works best for you. Emotional journaling. This exercise involves writing down our emotions and the events that triggered them. Reflecting on our emotions in this way can help us to gain a deeper understanding of the underlying cause and meanings of our emotions. Emotion-focused copying strategies, such as emotional expression, emotional regulation, and problem-focused copying. Emotion-focused coping strategies helps to process and understand the meaning behind our emotions, which can be beneficial in dealing with them. It's important to find the exercise that works best for us and make them a consistent part of our daily routine. And it's important to be mindful of our emotions and take action to regulate them as soon as they arise. This way, it'll be easier to manage them. The law of emotional intelligence is a powerful principle that teaches us how to understand and manage our emotions in order to lead a better and more fulfilling life. One of the fundamental principles of emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive and become aware of our emotions. And this means becoming conscious of the emotions we are experiencing and identifying the triggers that cause them. Becoming aware of our emotions is essential for emotional intelligence because it allows us to evaluate and interpret them in a more objective way. When we're not aware of our emotions, we may react to them without understanding the reasons behind our actions. And this can lead to negative outcomes, such as acting impulsively or making poor decisions. Today, we have explored the various tools and techniques that can help us to become aware of our emotions and tap into the power of the law of emotional intelligence. From mindfulness practices to emotional self-awareness exercises, it's important to find the one that works best for us. It's also important to remember that the law of emotional intelligence is an ongoing process, and it requires consistent effort and practice to develop and maintain the skill. By becoming aware of our emotions, we can gain insights into the underlying cause of our emotions and how they're impacting our thoughts and actions. This can help us to take appropriate actions and lead a more fulfilling life. I'm Leroy Glover, and I thank you.